We heard in the first reading of the book of Proverbs that wisdom has built her house. Really nice big house, very sturdy, and there's 7 columns in it. And then to prepare the food of choice meats and fine wines. And then Lady Wisdom goes out and says to the whole countryside, "Come into my house of wisdom." Says to the simple and those who lack understanding, "Come in here and eat of this food," symbolically, eat of the wisdom that will bring you to life. Forsake foolishness. Come and be wise. A little bit later on, not in the reading this morning, but a little bit later on in that chapter from Proverbs, it talks about Lady Folly or foolishness. Utterly foolish, she knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house upon a seat on the city heights, calling to passers-by as they go their way. Let those who are naive turn in here. To those who lack sense, I say, stolen water is sweet, and bread taken secretly is pleasing. Little do they know that the shades, darkness is there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol, on their way to hell. This past week, before I get there, would you have to admit that all of us have a choice of 2 houses to live in, the house of wisdom and the house of folly, of foolishness, and that we have to admit that we've spent some time in the house of foolishness? Would you all have to admit that? Of course. It's called sin. But this past week, we heard on the news another scandal in the church in the state of Pennsylvania, and the diocese is there, that just kind of rocked us again. When we found out that over 300 priests abused more than 1,000, I suspect a lot more, but more than 1,000 children and young adults throughout the decades. Not only is that bad enough, but it was enabled to happen even more because the leaders knew about some of it and just moved priests around and protected them instead of going to the police. I don't know about you, but I'll tell you what I felt. First of all, a deep sadness and compassion for those innocent lives that were messed up because of that abuse. I feel that deeply. And also a sense of anger, discouragement, and betrayal for members of the ordained clergy, including the bishops, who really betrayed the church and entered that house of foolishness, and all of them getting involved in criminal behavior, scandalous, morally corrupt behavior. And it reminded me of how I felt in 2002 when the whole Boston scandal came out. And I was in Terre Haute, Indiana at the time, and they have about around 5% Catholic in that city. And I was called to go to the hospital to anoint someone who was dying. So I had to put on my Roman collar and walk on this through, after I parked through the sidewalk into the hospital. And I remember very distinctly the looks that I got. And the looks were like this. Are you one of them? I went and anointed the person anyway. They had to be offered the sacrament. I did it. I don't know how you feel, but I I suspect we all have feelings of somewhere along that line, which might make us ask the question, what kind of church do we live in anyway? As I thought and prayed about this, I came back with the same answer that I came back in 2002. We live in a church that is divine and human, and sometimes as human, we walk away from the divine and choose foolishness, choose criminal, immoral behavior. Some of our members do. That's been that way, and it will continue to be that way, but I hope never, ever like it has been recently. But Jesus Christ says that he is present to us always. That can be hard to believe, can it? Well, it was hard to believe in the gospel we heard this morning when Jesus is saying, I'm the bread of life. Unless you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you will not have life in you. And the people are looking and going, what? I don't get it. How am I going to? I'm not eating your flesh and drinking your blood. And they could not see beyond what their eyes could see. They couldn't see meaning beyond what their eyes could see. And to tell you the truth, I'm not sure if I was there then what I would have done. It would have been pretty strange language to me as well. And next week we'll find out that some of them left Jesus. So it was hard for them to believe. It's also hard for many Catholics to believe because in some recent survey, they gave a percentage, I forget the percentage, but a percentage of Catholics who do not believe in the real presence of Jesus in the form of bread and wine as his body and blood here in this altar that they take and receive. Yeah, it's just some kind of symbol or anything, but they don't believe that God has the power to put his presence in human elements, in the elements of bread and wine. It's hard for them to believe. Well, in a way, you can't blame them. It's kind of a mystery. So it is kind of hard to believe. It's also hard to believe in the presence of Christ when we are at the worst points in our life. When our lives get messed up. Maybe we did it, maybe we only had a part to play in it, or maybe it got done to us, but our lives get messed up in one way or another, and it's not too hard in those kind of situations to say, where are you now, God? You said you'd always be here. It certainly doesn't look like it. It's hard to believe then too. But Jesus Christ is the one who said, like in the end of Matthew's gospel, behold, I am with you all days until the end of time. And what I think we need to do, if you're still around, what we need to do is to look for evidence of his presence. And I'll tell you where I find it. I find it in his word. That his word for me is the truth. And in some ways it can be hard to find truth today. The way that lies are thrown around day in and day out. But in Jesus' word, I find the truth. The truth that keeps me on a path in life, the truth which speaks to my heart and my soul, the truth that gives me a way to live my life, which I believe is worth living. He's in the Word. I also believe that he is in his body, the church. That means you and me. Let me tell you how I got through Terre Haute. Even though I got those looks more than once, I never got it. In the parish I served. No one ever looked at me or asked that way or asked me that question, are you one of them? And in my time there, together we got through it. The presence of Christ is there in us, his body. I have experienced it. I certainly hope you have. And if you haven't, it is possible to do that. We just need to open our hearts to other believing people and find someone else to walk with, because they need somebody to walk with as well. The presence of Jesus is in this body, his body, the church. And I also believe in his real presence, the body and blood of Christ, under the form of bread and wine in the Eucharist. I've had some profound experiences of his presence when I have received him in the Eucharist. Maybe you have, I hope so. Now, I know a lot of days we come here and this is just kind of what we do when we believe and we come up and receive the Eucharist. And it's not a gourmet meal, and that's just kind of how we live our life. But sometimes, when we need it most, or when we celebrate and are aware of God's presence most, we can sense, we can experience his presence as we receive him, because he becomes part of us and we become part of him. And we need to know this, that when we receive Jesus Christ under the Eucharist in ourselves, that we receive a share in the triumphs and the tragedies of his body. We also participate in a share of the joys, the pains, and the sufferings of his body. We're not just saying, oh good, I'm all set, I'm on my way. No, we receive him in all of who he is, in his divinity, as well as in his humanity, present in each of God's created human beings. Some people will leave the church because of this, some already have. I can understand why they might do that, but it's a shame, because I believe Jesus Christ is still here and will always be here, and that what is going on now is a house cleaning. Wisdom has built her house, has invited us to be in it, and sometimes our sinful humanity gets in the way. It needs to be cleaned out. We did it in our own archdiocese. Now it's going to happen in Pennsylvania, and I suspect other places as well. But he's cleaning out the house, God is, and still inviting us in to come in and eat of his body and drink of his blood. Receive his presence. Because as the Lady Wisdom says, when you eat of these foods, you will live forever.